He signed the divorce papers with a flourish, using a Mont Blanc pen he had bought on credit while his wife Sarah counted change for a bus ticket. Lucas looked at her with pure contempt, convinced she was the anchor dragging his brilliant potential into the mud. He was leaving her for a woman driving a Porsche, certain he had finally upgraded his life. He didn't know that 3 hours prior a law firm in Zurich had verified a DNA test. Sarah wasn't just a broke waitress. She was the sole heiress to the Obsidian Skyline estate. And Lucas had just walked away from half of $1.3 billion. The radiator in the cramped apartment in the Bronx hissed and sputtered a dying mechanical breath that matched the atmosphere in the room. Sarah Bennett scraped the last of the pasta onto a chipped ceramic plate. It was plain spaghetti with butter and garlic powder because the bank account sat at exactly $12.43 until her shift at the diner on Friday. She placed the plate on the table, the steam rising in the cold air. "Lucas, dinner is ready." Lucas O'Connell didn't look up from his laptop. He was sitting on their second-hand sofa, the blue light of the screen illuminating a face twisted in permanent annoyance. He was typing furiously, working on a pitch deck for Harrington Global, the real estate firm where he worked as a junior associate. He wasn't a broker yet, just a glorified assistant, but he wore the ambition like a suit of armor. "I'm not hungry, Sarah," he snapped, finally closing the laptop with a sharp clack. "I ate at Cipriani with the team." Sarah felt a pang of hunger in her own stomach, but she ignored it. "Cipriani, Lucas, that costs more than our weekly grocery budget." "Did the company pay?" Lucas stood up, adjusting his silk tie, a tie Sarah had bought him for his birthday by working double shifts for a month. "No, the company didn't pay. I paid. It's called networking, Sarah. It's called investing in a future. Something you wouldn't understand while you're wiping tables at that grease pit." The insult landed softly familiar and worn. For 3 years, Sarah had supported him. When he failed the bar exam, she paid the rent. When he decided to pivot to real estate, she paid for his licensing courses. She walked to work to save subway fare so he could take Ubers to meetings, terrified he would look low class, arriving on foot. "I understand investing," Sarah said quietly, sitting down to eat the cold pasta alone. "But we have rent due on Tuesday. The landlord, Mr. Henderson, said he won't wait this time." Lucas laughed a cruel, dry sound. He walked over to the window, looking out at the rain-slicked alleyway and the overflowing dumpsters. "Mr. Henderson, that cockroach. You worry about pennies, Sarah. That's your problem. You have a poverty mindset. I spent $300 on lunch today because I sat next to Bradley Pierce. Do you know who that is? He's the VP of Acquisitions. He liked my suit. He liked my ideas." "Did he give you a raise?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. Lucas spun around, his eyes blazing. "You just don't get it. You're an anchor, Sarah. You're heavy. You hold me in this filth." He gestured around the apartment that Sarah kept meticulously clean despite its decay. "I walk into that office and I feel like a king. Then I come home to you smelling like diner coffee and desperation, and I remember I'm nobody." Sarah put the fork down. She had lost her appetite. "I smell like diner coffee because I worked 10 hours today to pay for that suit you're wearing." "And that's the best you'll ever do," Lucas sneered. He walked to the bedroom and grabbed a duffel bag from the closet. It was already packed. Sarah's heart stopped. The silence in the room suddenly felt heavier than the arguments. "Lucas, what is that?" "I'm staying at a hotel tonight," he said, not meeting her eyes. "I need headspace. Big day tomorrow. I can't listen to you whining about rent and pasta." "We can't afford a hotel," Sarah whispered, standing up, panic rising in her chest. "I can," Lucas said, pulling a sleek silver credit card from his pocket. It wasn't their joint debit card. It was a platinum card Sarah had never seen. "I got approved last week. High limit. For high achievers." He didn't look back as he walked out the door. He didn't see the tears finally spill over Sarah's cheeks. He only saw the exit sign glowing red, marking his escape from a life he felt he was too good for. The hotel Lucas had mentioned was actually the penthouse suite at the St. Regis, but he wasn't paying for it. Jessica Vane was. Jessica was everything Sarah was not. She was the daughter of a tech mogul, a woman who had never worked a day in her life, but held a consultant title at a fashion firm. She had blonde hair treated by the best stylists in Manhattan's skin that glowed from weekly facials, and a laugh that sounded like champagne bubbling over. Lucas lay back on the 800 thread count sheets watching Jessica pour 2 glasses of vintage Pinot Noir. "Did you do it?" Jessica asked, handing him the glass. Her nails were painted a sharp blood red. "I left," Lucas said, taking a sip. The wine tasted like freedom. "I didn't tell her it was permanent yet. I need to get the paperwork drafted." Jessica sat on the edge of the bed, running a hand through his hair. "You know my father can't give you that position at Vane Technologies if you're still attached to her. It's a bad look, Lucas. A man of your potential with a waitress, it screams bad judgment." "I know," Lucas said, his grip tightening on the glass. "She's just pathetic. She thinks small. She counts coupons. It's exhausting." "Well, you don't have to worry about coupons anymore." Jessica smiled, leaning in to kiss him. "My lawyer, Mr. Pembroke, drafted the papers for you. They're in my bag. We can serve her tomorrow." The next afternoon, the rain had turned into a torrential downpour. Sarah was sitting at the small kitchen table staring at the unpaid electric bill when the knock came. She jumped up thinking it was Lucas coming home to apologize. She had rehearsed what she would say, that she supported him, but they needed to be a team. She opened the door, a hopeful smile on her face. It wasn't Lucas. It was a process server, a burly man in a wet raincoat who shoved a thick manila envelope into her chest. "Sarah O'Connell." "Yes." "You've been served." As the man turned to leave, Lucas stepped out from the hallway shadows. He was wearing a new trench coat, dry and pristine, holding a large umbrella over a woman Sarah had only seen in magazines. "Lucas?" Sarah gasped, clutching the envelope. "Read it, Sarah," Lucas said coldly. "Irreconcilable differences. I'm filing for immediate dissolution." The woman, Jessica, looked at Sarah with a mixture of pity and disgust. She scanned Sarah's worn gray sweater and the messy bun in her hair. "So this is her," Jessica said, her voice dripping with amusement. "She really does look like she belongs in this neighborhood. Please." Sarah stepped into the hallway, ignoring the cold spray of rain blowing in. "Lucas, we've been together since college. You can't just do this in the hallway." "I can," Lucas said. "And there's one more thing. The lease." Sarah froze. "What about it?" "It's in my name." Lucas stated, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "I spoke to the landlord this morning. I told him I'm terminating the lease effective immediately. He's already agreed to relist the unit. You have 24 hours to vacate." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. 24 hours, Lucas, I have nowhere to go. I have $12. My family is gone. You are my family. I was your family, Lucas corrected her. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Jessica's ear, a gesture of intimacy he hadn't shown Sarah in years. "Now I'm moving on. Jessica and I are going to Paris next week. I need a clean break. No baggage." "You're kicking me out on the street." Sarah's voice cracked a sound of pure heartbreak. "You're a survivor, Sarah," Lucas said dismissively, turning his back. "Go pick up an extra shift. Find a shelter. I don't care. Just don't contact me. My lawyer will handle the rest." He guided Jessica down the stairs, their footsteps echoing on the concrete. Sarah stood in the doorway, the envelope damp in her hands. She watched them get into a sleek black Mercedes waiting at the curb. As the car drove away, splashing muddy water onto the sidewalk, Sarah realized she wasn't just heartbroken. She was destitute. She went back inside and packed the few things she owned into 2 plastic garbage bags. She left the furniture. She couldn't carry it. She left the wedding photos. She couldn't look at them. That night, Sarah slept in the waiting room of the bus station on 42nd Street. She used her bag as a pillow, clutching the divorce papers to her chest, terrified that if she let go, she would fall off the edge of the world. She didn't know that 50 blocks uptown, a private investigator named Arthur Penhaligon was frantically trying to find her holding a file that contained the deed to half the skyline of Manhattan. 3 days later, Sarah was unrecognizable. The exhaustion hung under her eyes like bruises. She had used the last of her money to buy a coffee just to be allowed to sit inside a 24-hour deli near Central Park to escape the biting wind. She had tried to call her boss at the diner, but her phone service had been cut off that morning. Another bill Lucas used to pay that he had silently canceled. She had missed 3 shifts. She was fired. She sat on the high stool, staring out the window at the wealthy people passing by. Women in furs, men in tailored suits, the world Lucas wanted so desperately to be part of. "Excuse me, miss." Sarah flinched, pulling her coat tighter around her. She expected the manager to kick her out. "I'm leaving," she whispered, sliding off the stool. "I just needed a minute." "No, please sit down," a voice said. It was deep, cultivated, and gentle. Sarah looked up. Standing before her was an older man, perhaps in his late 60s. He wore a charcoal wool coat that looked older than she was, but expensive. He held a black umbrella and a leather briefcase. His eyes were kind, framed by wire-rimmed glasses. "Are you Sarah Bennett?" the man asked. He used her maiden name. Sarah hesitated. I was. It's O'Connell now, but I'm changing it back soon." The man let out a long breath as if he had just finished a marathon. "Thank heavens. I've been looking for you for 72 hours. I went to your apartment in the Bronx, but the landlord said you'd been evicted. I checked the diner, they said you were gone." "Who are you?" Sarah asked, taking a step back. "Did Lucas send you? I signed the papers. I mailed them. He doesn't need to harass me." The man shook his head vigorously. "I do not know who Lucas is, but I can assure you I am not here on his behalf. My name is Reginald Graves. I am the senior executor for the estate of the late Arthur Pendleton." Sarah frowned. "Arthur, I think that was my grandmother's brother. I never met him. My mother said he was a hermit." "A hermit, yes." Reginald smiled faintly. "But a very productive one. May I—" He gestured to the empty stool next to her. Sarah nodded, too confused to object. Reginald sat down and placed the briefcase on the sticky counter. "Your great-uncle Arthur passed away 2 weeks ago. He had no children. His wife passed years ago. He was estranged from your side of the family because, well, he was a difficult man. Paranoid. He didn't trust banks, didn't trust the government, and certainly didn't trust his peers." "I'm sorry he died," Sarah said politely, though her stomach rumbled loudly. Reginald heard it. He raised a hand to the server. "2 sandwiches, please. The roast beef and fresh coffee." He turned back to Sarah. "Arthur was a land banker. Do you know what that is?" "No," Sarah said. "In the 1970s and 80s, when New York was crumbling, Arthur bought land. Lots of it. Parking lots, abandoned warehouses, old tenement buildings. He bought them for pennies. He never developed them. He just held them." Reginald unlocked the briefcase. He created a holding company called Obsidian Trust. For 40 years, the city grew up around his properties. Skyscrapers were built around his lots. Developers begged him to sell. He never did. He pulled out a thick document bound in blue velvet. "Sarah, the Obsidian Trust owns the land under 17 major skyscrapers in Manhattan. It owns 2 city blocks in Brooklyn. It owns the commercial complex currently leased by Harrington Global." Sarah's breath hitched. "Harrington Global? That's where my husband works." "Your ex-husband," Reginald corrected gently. "As of his filing, he has legally separated his assets from yours, which is fortunate for you." "Why?" Reginald opened the folder. "Because Arthur Pendleton left everything to his only living blood relative. You." Sarah stared at the papers. The numbers blurred. I don't understand. Is there money? Reginald adjusted his glasses. The cash reserves in the trust are approximately $80 million. But the real estate portfolio, based on the current market valuation of the land rights and the lease incomes. He paused, looking her dead in the eye. The portfolio is valued at $1.3 billion. The deli went silent. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to stop. Sarah gripped the edge of the counter. Billion, she whispered. With a B. With a B, Reginald confirmed. And there is one more thing. As the sole owner of the land, you have controlling interest in the lease agreements. The building at 400 Park Avenue, the headquarters of Harrington Global. Their 99-year lease had a termination clause triggered by the death of the original owner. You have the right to renegotiate their rent, or evict them. Sarah sat there, the smell of roast beef sandwiches suddenly filling the air. She thought of Lucas. She thought of his poverty mindset speech. She thought of Jessica Vane and her Porsche. She thought of the rain on her face as she walked away from her home with 2 garbage bags. She looked at her reflection in the deli window. She looked tired, dirty, and broken. But Reginald Graves was looking at her like she was the Queen of England. Mr. Graves, Sarah said, her voice finding a strength she didn't know she had left. I think I'm going to need a very good lawyer, and a shower. Reginald smiled, closing the briefcase. I have a car waiting outside Ms. Bennett, and I have taken the liberty of booking the presidential suite at the plaza, under your name. Sarah stood up. She left the garbage bags on the floor. She wouldn't need them where she was going. The transformation of Sarah Bennett did not happen overnight. It was not a montage of shopping bags and salon visits, though those certainly played a part. It was a rigorous, painful, and exhilarating deconstruction of the person Lucas had convinced her she was. For the first month, Sarah lived inside the Plaza Hotel, but she rarely saw the city. Her suite became a command center. Reginald Graves, true to his word, had assembled a team that functioned less like a legal counsel and more like a Praetorian guard. There was Henrietta, a 60-year-old forensic accountant who could find a missing penny in a billion-dollar ledger, and David, a crisis management specialist who had previously worked for the State Department. You are not just wealthy, Sarah, Reginald told her one Tuesday morning over a breakfast of smoked salmon and poached eggs. You are a sovereign power in this city, but power without knowledge is dangerous. You need to understand what you own. And so Sarah studied. She sat for 10 hours a day learning the intricacies of air rights, commercial zoning laws, and triple net leases. She learned to read a balance sheet better than she had ever read a dinner menu. She learned the language of the elite, the silence that speaks louder than shouting, the handshake that signals a deal, and the gaze that dismisses a fool without a word. While Sarah sharpened her mind, she also rebuilt her armor. The worn gray sweaters and sensible shoes were incinerated literally. Henrietta had insisted on a ceremonial burning in the hotel fireplace. In their place came a wardrobe of structural, intimidating elegance. Sarah favored monochrome sharp white blazers, tailored black trousers, and dresses in deep navy that fit like a second skin. Her hair, once a frizzy afterthought, was cut into a sleek, angular bob that framed her face, highlighting high cheekbones she hadn't known she possessed. But the most significant change was her eyes. The fear was gone. The desperation that had made her tolerate Lucas's cruelty had evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. Meanwhile, oblivious to the storm gathering above his head, Lucas O'Connell was enjoying what he believed was his meteoric rise. With Sarah gone, he had thrown himself into his new life with Jessica Vane. Jessica's father, realizing Lucas was now unencumbered, had opened doors at Harrington Global that were previously locked. Lucas was promoted to Senior Director of Acquisitions. He bought a penthouse in Tribeca, heavily leveraged, of course, and leased a Maserati. You see, Lucas told Jessica one evening at a gala at the Met, I told you she was the problem. I cut the dead weight and look at me now. I'm flying. Jessica sipped her champagne, her eyes scanning the room for photographers. You look good, Lucas. Just make sure the divorce is finalized. Daddy says the Vane family image needs to be pristine before the wedding. It's done, Lucas assured her. She signed everything. She didn't even ask for alimony. Probably too stupid to know she could. She's probably back in some trailer park in Ohio by now. He laughed, a sound that grated on the ears of the few people nearby who knew the truth. Rumors were swirling in the upper echelons of New York real estate. A new player had emerged. No one had seen her face, but the name Obsidian Trust was suddenly on everyone's lips. They were buying adjacent lots, consolidating power, and refusing meetings with the city's biggest developers. They called the owner the Ghost. Lucas, arrogant in his new position, dismissed the rumors. Ghosts don't sign contracts, he told his boss, the CEO of Harrington Global, a bullish man named Victor Moretti. It's probably some foreign conglomerate hiding behind a shell company. I'll handle them when the time comes. The time came sooner than he expected. It was a rainy Tuesday in November, 6 months after Sarah had been evicted. Victor Moretti summoned Lucas to his office. The CEO looked pale, sweating through his custom shirt. Sit down, O'Connell, Victor barked. Lucas sat, crossing his legs confidently. What's the play, Victor? We acquiring the Hudson Yards project. We're in trouble, Victor said, sliding a thick letter across the mahogany desk. It bore the seal of Obsidian Trust. The lease on this building, the headquarters, it expires in 30 days. Lucas frowned. I thought we had a 99-year lock. We did, Victor snapped. But the original owner died. The contract has a change of control clause. The new owner, this Obsidian Trust, has the right to terminate, and they just sent notice. Lucas picked up the letter. The language was standard, but the implication was catastrophic. If Harrington Global lost its headquarters, the stock would tank. They had millions of dollars in infrastructure, servers, and trading floors built into the tower. Moving would cost a fortune they didn't have. They're bluffing, Lucas scoffed. They want a rent hike. Everyone wants a squeeze. It's not a squeeze, Lucas, Victor said, his voice trembling. Read the last paragraph. Lucas scanned to the bottom. The trust is not interested in renewal at the current market rate. We intend to repurpose the property. You have 30 days to vacate. Vacate? Lucas stood up. That's insane. Who is the contact? A lawyer named Reginald Graves, Victor said. He's agreed to one meeting, next Friday. He says the principal will be there. The principal, the owner, the ghost. Victor looked at Lucas with desperate eyes. You're the closer, Lucas. You're the hotshot who says he can sell ice to an Eskimo. I'm putting this on you. Fix it. Get us a renewal. I don't care what it costs. Just keep us in this building. If you fail, Harrington Global collapses, and your career goes down with it. Lucas straightened his tie. He felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. The challenge that would define him. Consider it done, Victor. I'll charm this ghost. Whoever he is, he has a price. Everyone has a price. Lucas walked out of the office, already mentally spending the bonus he would get for saving the company. He didn't know that the ghost he was preparing to manipulate was the same woman he had left crying over a bowl of spaghetti. The week leading up to the meeting was a frenzy of preparation for Lucas. He researched Reginald Graves and found nothing but a pristine record of high-end estate management. He tried to dig into Obsidian Trust, but the privacy walls were impenetrable. It's frustrating, Lucas complained to Jessica over dinner at Le Bernardin. It's like fighting a shadow. I don't even know if the owner is a man or a woman, old or young. Does it matter? Jessica asked, bored. She was scrolling through wedding venues on her phone. Just dazzle them. Use that smile. It worked on me. It worked on you because you have taste. Lucas smirked. This owner, if they're holding on to old land, they're probably some ancient dinosaur. Conservative. Old money. I'll go in with the heritage and legacy pitch. They eat that stuff up. On the morning of the meeting, Lucas dressed with military precision. He wore his most expensive suit, a navy bespoke piece from Savile Row. He wore the watch Jessica had given him as an engagement present, a $50,000 Patek Philippe. He wanted to reek of success. He wanted the Obsidian owner to know they were dealing with an equal. The meeting was set for 10:00 a.m. at the Obsidian Trust temporary offices. Lucas expected a dusty old law library. Instead, the address led him to a newly renovated floor in the Chrysler building. The reception area was intimidatingly minimalist. White marble floors, black steel furniture, and a view of the city that made Lucas dizzy. "Mr. O'Connell," the receptionist said, not looking up from her screen. "They are waiting for you in conference room A." Lucas walked down the long corridor. He checked his reflection in the glass wall. Perfect. He pushed open the heavy oak doors. The conference room was vast. At the far end sat a long table made of black obsidian, a nod to the company name. Reginald Graves sat at the right hand of the head of the table. But the chair at the head of the table was turned away facing the window. All Lucas could see was the back of a high black leather executive chair and a slender hand resting on the armrest, fingers tapping a rhythm that felt strangely familiar. "Mr. O'Connell," Reginald said, standing up. His voice was icy. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Graves," Lucas said, putting on his best winning smile. He walked forward, extending his hand. Reginald did not take it. Lucas awkwardly withdrew, clearing his throat. "I'm here to discuss the misunderstanding regarding the lease. Harrington Global has been a model tenant for 20 years. We are prepared to offer a significant increase in rent to maintain our partnership." "Partnership implies equality, Mr. O'Connell," Reginald said dryly. "We do not view you as partners. We view you as squatters on valuable land." Lucas bristled. "Squatters. We are a Fortune 500 firm. We employ 2,000 people in this building." "And you pay 1990s rent prices," Reginald countered. "But this isn't about money. The principal has a specific vision for the property, a vision that does not include Harrington Global." Lucas shifted his gaze to the turned chair. "Perhaps if I could speak to the principal directly, I'm sure we can find common ground." "Speak," the voice came from the chair. Lucas froze. The voice was low modulated, but it sent a shiver down his spine. It sounded like, "No, it couldn't be." "Sir," Lucas addressed the chair, assuming it was a man. "I know you value legacy. My firm is built on legacy. We build the future. Evicting us would be a stain on the city's economy. It would be cruel." "Cruel," the voice repeated. Interesting word choice. The chair slowly began to swivel. Lucas adjusted his cuffs, ready to make eye contact with some geriatric billionaire. The chair finished its turn. Sitting there was a woman. She wore a white suit that glowed against the dark room. Her hair was sharp, her makeup flawless. She looked like a cover model for Forbes, radiating a terrifying serene power. But it was the face. Lucas's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His brain short-circuited. He blinked once, twice, sure he was having a stroke. "Hello, Lucas," Sarah said. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She looked at him with the clinical detachment of a scientist examining a bug under a microscope. "Sarah," Lucas whispered the name, strangling him. "What? How?" "You're the secretary." Reginald chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Mr. O'Connell, you are addressing Ms. Sarah Bennett, the sole proprietress of the Obsidian Trust and the owner of the building you are currently standing in. And coincidentally, the building your office is in." Lucas stumbled back, grabbing the back of a chair for support. "This is a joke. You're a waitress. You're broke. I left you with nothing." "You did," Sarah agreed calmly. She picked up a file from the table. "You left me with $12.43. I remember the exact amount. It's funny what sticks in your mind when you're hungry." "But the money, how?" Lucas was hyperventilating. "It doesn't matter how," Sarah said, waving her hand dismissively. "What matters is that I own the ground you walk on, Lucas. Literally." She opened the file. I've reviewed your proposal. You want a renewal. Yes. Lucas managed to say, his mind racing. She still loves me, he thought wildly. She must. This is a game. She wants me back. I can fix this. He straightened up, forcing a smile onto his pale face. Sarah, look, babe. I know things ended roughly, but this is incredible. You and me. Think of what we can do. We're a power couple now. I always knew you had it in you. I was pushing you, don't you see? I had to be hard on you to unlock this. Reginald looked like he was about to be sick, but Sarah didn't flinch. You were pushing me? Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, it was tough, love. Lucas took a step forward, his confidence returning in a delusional rush. And it worked. Look at you, you're magnificent. We can forget the divorce. We can annul it. We can run this city together. Sarah stared at him for a long moment. The silence stretched until it was unbearable. Reginald, Sarah said softly, did Mr. O'Connell sign the lease termination acknowledgement? He did not, ma'am. Sarah, please, Lucas pleaded, reaching out. Don't do this. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry I left. I made a mistake. Jessica. She means nothing. She's shallow. You're the real deal. I love you. Sarah stood up. She walked around the table, her heels clicking on the marble. She stopped inches from Lucas. He could smell her perfume. Something expensive. Woody and floral, miles away from the diner. Coffee smell he used to mock. You don't love me, Lucas, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. You love the reflection of yourself you see in my success, but the mirror is broken. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a single item. It was the Mont Blanc pen he had used to sign the divorce papers. She had found it in the apartment after he left. She pressed it into his chest pocket. I'm not evicting Harrington Global, Sarah said. Lucas let out a sob of relief. Oh, thank God. Sarah, thank you. I knew you still... I'm not evicting the company, Sarah corrected him. I'm willing to renew the lease for 10 years, at the current rate. It's a gift. That's amazing, Lucas stammered. But there is one condition, Sarah said, her eyes hardening into diamonds. A clause I've added to the contract. It's non-negotiable. Anything, Lucas said. Anything you want. The key man clause, Sarah said. Usually it demands that a certain essential employee must remain at the company for the lease to be valid. But my clause is the opposite. It's a persona non grata clause. Lucas felt the cold creeping back into his veins. What does that mean? It means, Sarah said, leaning in close, that Harrington Global can stay in my building only if one specific employee is terminated immediately and permanently barred from the premises. She smiled, then a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You, Lucas. The condition is you. The silence that descended upon the conference room was absolute, a physical weight that pressed against Lucas's eardrums. The only sound was the distant, low-frequency hum of the city's infrastructure 40 floors below, a city Lucas was rapidly realizing was slipping through his fingers like sand. You can't do that, Lucas whispered the words, scraping out of a dry throat. He looked from Sarah to Reginald, his eyes wide and frantic. That's illegal. That's discrimination. You can't dictate hiring policy to a third-party company. Reginald Graves adjusted his glasses, his expression mild but his tone possessing the finality of a gavel strike. It is a private contract between two corporate entities, Mr. O'Connell. We are not dictating policy. We are establishing risk management parameters. We simply stipulate that we do not wish for individuals with a documented history of financial irresponsibility or what we deem moral bankruptcy to have access to our property. It is a standard bad actor exclusion. Sarah didn't look at Lucas. She had turned her chair slightly, directing her gaze toward the door, dismissing him before he had even left the room. You have 1 hour to clear out your desk, Lucas, she said, her voice devoid of the warmth he used to take for granted. I've already sent the term sheet to Victor Moretti. He has it in his inbox right now. He knows the condition. In fact, he's waiting for the final signature page. Lucas stared at her profile, searching for a crack. a sign of the woman who used to mend his shirts and cook his meals. There was nothing. Just the marble-cold resolve of a stranger. He turned and ran. He didn't walk with the confident stride of a senior director. He sprinted out of the conference room, ignoring the startled gasp of the receptionist as he flew past the desk. He jammed the button for the elevator, his knuckles white, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "She's bluffing," he told himself, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Victor won't do it. I'm the star. I'm the rainmaker. He needs me." When the elevator doors dinged open on the Harrington Global floor at 400 Park Avenue, Lucas burst into the lobby. But the atmosphere was wrong. The usual chaotic buzz of the trading floor, the shouting, the phones ringing, the energy of money changing hands had dampened into a murmuring hush. As he rushed past the rows of desks, heads turned. The junior analysts, the ones he usually ignored or barked coffee orders at, were watching him. They weren't looking at him with the usual mix of fear and envy. They were whispering. They were looking at him like he was a dead man walking. He threw open the heavy glass door to Victor Moretti's corner office without knocking. "Victor, don't sign it," Lucas shouted, barging in. "It's a trick. She's trying to leverage you." Victor Moretti was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the view he had been terrified of losing just an hour ago. He didn't jump at Lucas's entrance. He turned slowly, his face etched with a strange mixture of relief and resignation. "It's not a trick, Lucas," Victor said heavily. He gestured to his computer screen where a digital document sat open. "I just got off the phone with their legal counsel. The lease renewal is real. 10 years. A fixed rate at current market value." Victor paused, letting the numbers hang in the air. "Do you know what that means for us? In this economy, it saves the company over $300 million in operating costs over the next decade. It saves the entire Q4 projection." "But the clause?" Lucas gasped, stepping forward, his hands shaking as he reached across the mahogany desk. "She wants you to fire me, Victor. She's my ex-wife. This is a personal vendetta. You can't let her dictate who you employ. I'm your top earner. I brought in the Hudson Yards deal. You can't trade me for rent." Victor looked at Lucas, really looked at him for the first time in years. He saw the sweat beading on his forehead, the desperation in his eyes, the arrogance that had curdled into panic. "You were a top earner, Lucas," Victor corrected him, his voice dropping to a cold, pragmatic monotone. "But you are not worth $300 million. No single employee is, not even me." "I can sue!" Lucas screamed, his voice cracking, spiraling out of control. "I'll sue you for wrongful termination. I'll sue her for tortious interference. I'll burn this place down." Victor's expression hardened. He picked up a piece of paper from his desk, a termination notice that had already been printed and signed. "You signed an at-will employment contract, Lucas," Victor said sharply. "And frankly, after hearing what you did to her, leaving her destitute while you expensed $300 lunches to this firm, I don't think a jury is going to like you very much. You're a liability, Lucas. And I don't keep liabilities on the payroll." Victor pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Security. Yes, he's here. Please escort Mr. O'Connell out of the building immediately." "Victor, please." Lucas pleaded, his dignity shattering. "I have a mortgage. I have a wedding coming up. You can't do this." 2 large security guards stepped into the office. These were men Lucas had walked past every morning for 3 years without ever learning their names. Now they were the arbiters of his fate. "Let's go, Mr. O'Connell," one said, his voice deep and unyielding, grabbing Lucas's arm with a grip like iron. "Get your hands off me," Lucas shouted, thrashing as they dragged him backward. "I'm a senior director. You work for me." "Not anymore, sir," the guard said. They dragged him out of the office and into the main hallway. The entire office had stopped working to watch the spectacle. The interns he had bullied, the secretaries he had dismissed as overhead, the junior associates whose ideas he had stolen, they were all standing there, a silent gallery of witnesses to his downfall. There was no sympathy in their eyes. There was only the grim satisfaction of seeing gravity finally take hold. They marched him to the elevator, rode it down in stony silence, and hauled him through the pristine marble lobby. With a final shove, they threw him out onto the sidewalk of Park Avenue. "And don't come back," the guard said, tossing Lucas's leather briefcase onto the wet concrete beside him. The glass door slid shut. His keycard was deactivated before he could even stand up. It had started to rain a cold, gray drizzle that soaked into his Savile Row suit within seconds. Lucas stood there, drenched, shivering, staring at the revolving doors that were now barred to him. He fumbled for his phone with wet, trembling fingers. He had to call Jessica. She was his lifeline. Her father, the tech mogul, was powerful. He could fix this. He could get Lucas a job at Vane Technologies. This was just a setback, a story they would laugh about on their yacht in a few years. "Jessica," he panted when she finally answered, trying to inject a note of confidence into his voice. "Babe, listen. Something crazy happened. You're not going to believe this. Sarah, she's the owner. The ghost. She forced them to cut me loose. It's insane. But listen, I need you to talk to your dad. I need an intro at Vane Tech. Just until I sue them and get my settlement." There was a long, hollow silence on the other end of the line, the kind of silence that screams louder than shouting. "I know," Jessica said. Her voice was clipped, devoid of the bubbly warmth he was used to. "It's all over the industry blogs, Lucas. Harrington VP fired as condition of billion-dollar lease deal. You're trending on Twitter. They're calling it the O'Connell Clause. So, it's press. There's no such thing as bad publicity, right? We can spin this." "My father called me 5 minutes ago," Jessica said, her tone icy. "He said you're radioactive. If Sarah Bennett has that kind of leverage over Harrington, she likely has influence elsewhere. Vane Tech leases 3 warehouses on her land in Queens. We can't afford to be enemies with the Obsidian Trust." Lucas felt the ground open up beneath him. "Jessica, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I can't be with a liability," Jessica replied, the word echoing Victor's judgment. "It's a bad look, Lucas. A man who gets fired by his ex-wife. It's pathetic. The wedding is off." "Jessica, wait. Don't come to the apartment." She cut him off. "I've already sent your things to the concierge. The doorman has been instructed not to let you up. Goodbye, Lucas." The line went dead. Lucas lowered the phone, staring at the black screen as the rain ran down his face, mixing with tears he hadn't realized he was shedding. He looked up at the skyscraper towering above him, the steel and glass monolith he used to think he owned. High above on the 40th floor, he imagined Sarah looking down. But she wasn't. She wasn't watching him suffer. She wasn't thinking about him at all. She had already moved on to the next meeting, leaving him standing in the rain, a man who had traded everything for gold only to find himself holding a handful of dust. 1 year later, the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was alive with a symphony of crystal flutes, low laughter, and the soft rustle of silk. It was the annual gala for the New York Restoration Project, an event where the city's power brokers gathered to congratulate themselves on shaping the metropolis. But tonight, the center of gravity wasn't the mayor, nor was it the senators mingling near the open bar. The magnetic pull of the room was focused entirely on one woman standing beneath the cascading chandeliers. Sarah Bennett wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the ambient light, tailored to perfection, to accentuate a posture that had become steely and regal. She held a glass of sparkling water, listening intently as a property developer twice her age pitched an idea for a joint venture. She didn't just look wealthy. She looked substantial, as if she were as permanent and formidable as the skyscrapers her trust now commanded. In just 12 months, the mysterious ghost of the real estate world had stepped into the light. Sarah had transformed the Obsidian Trust from a passive, stagnant holding company into an aggressive force for ethical development. She had rehabilitated historic brownstones, lowered commercial rents to save dying small businesses, and funded public parks, where concrete slabs had once sat. The press had given her a new title, one she wore with quiet pride, the queen of the skyline. Ms. Bennett. Sarah turned to find a senior correspondent from the Times standing there, a recorder already in hand. A moment the room is buzzing about your announcement regarding the South Bronx initiative. Is it true you're buying back the entire city block on 148th Street? Sarah smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. Eyes that were no longer shadowed by exhaustion or fear. It is true. We aren't just buying it. We're rebuilding it. We're turning it into a mixed-income community with rent-stabilized units for service workers. Good housing shouldn't be a luxury, Mr. Evans. It should be a right. The reporter scribbled furiously. You seem to have a deep personal connection to that specific neighborhood. Is there a reason? Sarah paused. The memory of a cold radiator and a plate of plain spaghetti flashed through her mind, sharp and vivid. I do, she said softly, her voice steady. It's where I lived when I had nothing. And it's where I learned exactly what I was made of. As the flashbulbs popped blinding white light against the blue velvet, Sarah felt a sudden need for air. She excused herself gracefully, slipping through the heavy French doors onto the limestone terrace overlooking Fifth Avenue. The winter air was crisp and biting, stinging her cheeks in a way that felt grounding. She walked to the stone balustrade and looked out over the city. It was a grid of gold and amber pulsating with life. A year ago, this city had tried to crush her. Now she held the deed to its foundation. She took a deep breath, inhaling the cold, finally free of the weight of someone else's expectations. 40 floors below, the reality was different. The traffic on Fifth Avenue was a snarled river of red taillights and exhaust fumes. Near the subway entrance, a man was huddled into a coat that was fraying at the seams. He was arguing with a street vendor, his voice shrill with frustration as he counted out nickels and dimes from a worn leather wallet. It was Lucas. He wasn't homeless, but he was balancing precariously on the edge of ruin. The fall from grace had been absolute. After the firing at Harrington Global, the industry had closed ranks. The key man clause Sarah had enforced became legendary, branding Lucas as a liability. He had sued, of course, fueled by arrogance and rage, but he had lost. The legal fees had drained his savings, and the reputation damage had torched his network. Now Lucas sold timeshares in New Jersey. He spent 4 hours a day commuting on a bus that smelled of diesel, pitching bad investments to people who couldn't afford them, only to return to a studio apartment that was smaller, damper, and darker than the one he had forced Sarah out of. That's all I have. Lucas snapped at the vendor, grabbing the hot dog. He turned away, hunching his shoulders against the wind, taking a bite of the lukewarm meat. It tasted like ash. He looked up, drawn by some instinct, some feeling of being watched. The Pierre Hotel loomed above him, a fortress of warmth and exclusivity. On the terrace, bathed in the golden spill of the ballroom lights, he saw a silhouette. The figure was distant but unmistakable. The cut of the hair, the poise, the way she held herself, it was Sarah. Lucas stopped chewing. He stood frozen on the dirty sidewalk, the crowd rushing past him, bumping his shoulders. He squinted, trying to bring her into focus. Up on the balcony, Sarah looked down. Her gaze locked onto the small, disheveled figure standing near the subway grate. For a heartbeat, time suspended. Lucas waited for a reaction. He expected her to point, to laugh, or perhaps to look away in shame. He wanted her to be angry. If she was angry, it meant he still mattered. It meant he still had power over her. But Sarah didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply looked at him. In her eyes there was no spark of recognition. There was no hatred, no triumph, no pity. There was only a vast, terrifying indifference. She looked at him the way one looks at a stranger in a crowd or a gust of wind. Something temporary and inconsequential. She was the ocean, and he was just a piece of driftwood she had long since washed ashore. With a slow, deliberate movement, Sarah turned her back on him. She didn't look back. She walked toward the warmth of the ballroom, toward the laughter, toward the future she had built with her own hands. Lucas watched the heavy glass doors close, sealing her into a world he could no longer touch. He stood alone in the cold, clutching his cheap dinner, shivering as the realization finally hit him. He had spent years telling her she had a poverty mindset. He had been wrong. Poverty wasn't about the money in the bank. It was about the emptiness of the soul. Sarah had been rich when she was poor because she had integrity, loyalty, and grit. And he had been poor even when he was rich because he had nothing inside him but greed. The wind howled down the avenue, cutting through his thin coat, but the cold inside his chest was colder still. That is the story of Sarah Bennett and the man who didn't know the value of the treasure he held until he threw it into the street. It is a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't defined by the balance in your bank account, but by how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you. Lucas chased the glitter of gold and lost the diamond. Sarah lost the dead weight and learned to soar. If you enjoyed this story of karma, resilience, and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people. And if you want more stories about people getting exactly what they deserve, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that the wheel always turns. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.
They said she was crazy. They said she was a gold digger who didn't know when to quit. When Fiona walked into the courtroom that Tuesday morning, nobody looked at her with pity. They looked at her with scorn. Her ex-husband, Marcus Sterling, had the best lawyers money could buy, a new fiancée on his arm, and a confident smirk that said, "I've already won." The judge was ready to dismiss the case. The gallery was laughing. But they didn't know what Fiona was holding in her trembling hands. They didn't know that she wasn't there for money. She was there for a reckoning, and it only took 11 words to turn Marcus's arrogance into pure, unadulterated terror. This is the story of how the underdog didn't just bite back, she swallowed the predator whole. The rain in Seattle that morning felt less like weather and more like an omen. It battered against the glass facade of the King County Superior Court, a relentless grey curtain that matched the mood in Fiona Vance's chest. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror of her 2014 Honda Civic. The car rattled as it idled, a stark contrast to the fleet of black Cadillac Escalades pulling up to the curb just 50 feet away. Fiona smoothed back a stray hair. She wasn't wearing designer labels. Her blazer was from a thrift store tailored by her own hands, late at night to look professional. Underneath her eyes, despite the concealer, lay the dark shadows of insomnia. "You can do this, Elle," she whispered to the empty car. "Just stick to the script." She grabbed the thick, worn leather binder from the passenger seat. It was heavy, physically and metaphorically. Inside wasn't just paperwork. It was 5 years of hell documented in receipts, emails, and transcripts. As she stepped out into the drizzle, the flashbulbs erupted. Not for her, of course. Marcus Sterling had arrived. He stepped out of the lead Escalade like he owned the sidewalk. At 42, Marcus looked like the poster child for American success, tech mogul philanthropist, the man who had supposedly revolutionized green energy with his company Sterling Dynamics. He wore a Navy bespoke suit that probably cost more than Fiona's car. On his arm was Jessica, his 24-year-old former assistant, now fiancée, wearing a white coat and looking every bit the innocent victim of a bitter ex-wife's harassment, as the tabloids had put it. The reporters swarmed them. Marcus, is it true she's asking for 10 million? Jessica, are you afraid of her?" Marcus paused, flashing that charming, practiced smile that had once fooled Fiona too. He raised a hand, silencing the crowd effortlessly. "Listen, everyone," Marcus said, his voice projecting calm authority. "I don't want to speak ill of Fiona. She's unwell. We just want this over with so Jessica and I can move on with our lives and continue our work for the city. We trust Judge Thorne to see the truth." Fiona walked past the fringe of the crowd, head down. A cameraman bumped into her, nearly knocking the binder from her hands. "Watch it, lady," he snapped, not even recognizing her. She entered the courthouse, the heavy oak doors closing behind her, muffling the noise of the circus outside. But the silence inside was worse. It was the silence of judgment. Her lawyer, a tired, overworked public defender named Silas Reed, was waiting by the metal detectors. Silas was a good man, but he was out of his depth. He had told her yesterday, "Fiona, look, Sterling has retained Blackwood and Associates, specifically Jonathan Kane. They call him the Butcher for a reason. If you take the settlement, the $50,000, you can walk away today. If we go in there, they are going to destroy you." Fiona looked at Silas now. He looked nervous. He was sweating. "Did you take the deal?" Silas whispered urgently as she approached. Fiona tightened her grip on the binder. "No." "Fiona," Silas hissed, "Jonathan Kane is going to paint you as unstable. He's going to bring up the therapy sessions, the incident at the restaurant, everything." "Let him," Fiona said, her voice shaking but her eyes hard. "I'm not here for the money, Silas. You know that. The court thinks you are. The press thinks you are. Even the judge probably thinks you are," Silas warned. "Then I guess I'll have to change their minds." They walked toward courtroom 4B. The hallway felt like a gauntlet. As they turned the corner, they saw Marcus and his legal team. It looked like an army. 6 lawyers in matching grey suits with Jonathan Kane at the center. Kane was a legend in Seattle legal circles, a man who had defended oil tycoons and corrupt senators and never lost. Kane saw Fiona and offered a thin, pitying smile. He leaned down to Marcus, whispered something, and Marcus laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. He looked at Fiona, his eyes cold and dead, devoid of the warmth he showed the cameras. He mouthed one word to her, "Goodbye." Fiona didn't flinch. She just touched the spine of her binder. "Not yet, Marcus," she thought. Not yet. Courtroom 4B was packed. It wasn't supposed to be a public spectacle, but Marcus's PR team had clearly leaked the schedule. The gallery was filled with reporters, Sterling Dynamics, shareholders, and curious onlookers hungry for drama. The bailiff announced, "All rise. The Honorable Judge Harrison Thorne presiding." Judge Thorne was a terrifying figure. He was known as Hardline Thorne. He despised time-wasters. He sat on the bench with a scowl etched into his features, shuffling papers with impatient aggression. "Be seated," Thorne grumbled. He looked over his spectacles at the 2 tables. On the right, the polished legion of Blackwood and Associates. On the left, Silas Reed and Fiona Vance. The visual disparity was laughable. "We are here for the matter of Vance vs. Sterling," Judge Thorne said, sounding bored already. "I've reviewed the motions. Mr. Kane, you're moving for a dismissal of the plaintiff's demand for revised alimony and a protective order against Miss Vance." Jonathan Kane stood up. He didn't just stand, he unfolded. He was tall, lean, and radiated predator energy. "Yes, Your Honor." Kane's voice was smooth as silk. "And frankly, Your Honor, we are appalled that we are even here. My client, Mr. Sterling, has been more than generous. He has offered a settlement far above what the prenuptial agreement stated. But Miss Vance—" He turned, gesturing to Fiona with a look of mock sympathy. "Miss Vance seems unable to accept that the marriage is over. She has engaged in a campaign of harassment, filing frivolous motions to delay my client's upcoming nuptials. We are asking the court to dismiss her claims with prejudice and grant the restraining order." The judge looked at Fiona. "Mr. Reed, your client is asking to reopen the financial discovery phase. On what grounds this divorce was finalized 6 months ago?" Silas stood up, clearing his throat. "Ah, yes, Your Honor. We believe We believe there were significant assets hidden during the initial proceedings. Kane laughed softly, just loud enough for the microphone to catch it. Hidden assets. Your Honor, Sterling Dynamics is a publicly traded company. Our books are open. Mr. Sterling's personal finances have been audited 3 times. This is a fishing expedition, plain and simple. Ms. Vance is grasping at straws because she's angry she's been replaced. A titter of laughter ran through the gallery. Fiona felt the heat rise in her cheeks. Ms. Vance, the judge said, addressing her directly, do you have proof, actual proof? Because if you are wasting my time with conspiracy theories, I will sanction you for legal fees. And looking at Mr. Kane's hourly rate that would bankrupt you. Silas looked at Fiona. He was terrified. He was ready to fold. Fiona stood up. Her legs felt like lead. Your Honor, she said. Her voice was too quiet. Speak up, Thorne snapped. Your Honor, she said louder this time. I am not asking for more alimony. I don't want his money. Then why are we here? Thorne asked. I am here to prove perjury, Fiona said. And fraud. Kane shot up. Objection. Your Honor, this is slander. Ms. Vance is using the court privilege to defame my client because she couldn't get a payout. Sustained, Thorne said, banging his gavel. Ms. Vance, sit down. Unless you have a document right now that proves fraud, I am dismissing this case. Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs. He whispered to Jessica, who covered a giggle with her hand. He looked at his watch, checking the time. He had a board meeting at 2:00 p.m. He was already mentally checking out. I have the documents, Fiona said, remaining standing. Then submit them, Thorne said, checking his watch as well. I can't submit them yet, Fiona said, because they require context. If I just hand them to you, Mr. Kane will bury them in technicalities. I need to ask Mr. Sterling one question on the stand. Absolutely not, Kane roared. I will not let my client be badgered by a woman who... One question. Fiona interrupted her voice, cutting through Kane's bluster. She turned to the judge. If he answers it and I'm wrong, I will sign the settlement. I will sign a non-disclosure agreement. I will leave Seattle and never speak the name Marcus Sterling again. The courtroom went silent. That was a massive gamble. Judge Thorne narrowed his eyes. He looked at Marcus. Marcus looked intrigued. He was a gambler at heart. He knew he had nothing to hide. He had scrubbed everything. His accountants were geniuses. Marcus leaned over to Kane. Let me do it. I'll humiliate her one last time, and then she's gone forever. Kane looked hesitant, but Marcus was the boss. Marcus stood up. I'll take the stand, Your Honor. I have nothing to hide. Let's end this charade. Fiona felt a cold chill run down her spine. The trap was set. But Marcus was slippery. If she missed, she lost everything. Marcus walked to the witness stand, took the oath, and sat down. He looked like a king on a throne, relaxed, smiling at the jury box that wasn't there. Proceed, Ms. Vance, the judge said. One question. Make it count. Fiona walked out from behind the table. She didn't take the binder. She walked to the center of the room, standing just a few feet from the man she had once loved. The man who had gaslit her, cheated on her, and left her with nothing but debt and doubt. She looked him in the eye. Marcus, she began, her voice steady. You testified during our divorce proceedings that Sterling Dynamics has 0 offshore holdings and that your only liquid assets are in the Bank of America, accounts disclosed in Exhibit C, correct? That's correct, Marcus said, looking bored. We went over this a year ago, Fiona. So, Fiona continued, taking a step closer, if I were to present a withdrawal slip from a bank that doesn't officially exist on your books, you would say it's a forgery. I would, Marcus scoffed. Because I don't have hidden accounts. I'm an open book. Fiona smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of an executioner. That wasn't my question, Fiona said. You said one question, Kane shouted. I'm getting to the specific question, Fiona said, not breaking eye contact with Marcus. Marcus, do you remember the weekend of July 4th, 2022? The weekend you said you were at a charity gala in San Francisco. Marcus blinked. A tiny, almost imperceptible twitch appeared under his left eye. Yes. Of course. Good, Fiona said. She turned to the gallery, then back to him. Then can you explain to this court, Fiona said, her voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like a scream, why your biometric signature was used to access a safety deposit box in Zurich, 5 hours after you were supposedly giving a speech in California. Silence. Absolute vacuum-sealed silence. Marcus's face didn't just pale, it went grey. Marcus stammered. That's impossible. Is it? Fiona pulled a single thin piece of paper from her pocket. It wasn't from the binder. It was a digital printout with a timestamp. Because I have the flight manifest from your private jet. The one you claim you sold 3 years ago. The tail number is registered to a shell company called Blue Heron. And Blue Heron is the name of the boat we bought on our honeymoon. Objection, Kane screamed, knocking his chair over as he stood up. This is ambush. This evidence was not in discovery. It wasn't in discovery, Fiona shouted over him, turning to the judge, because he hid the existence of the jet. This isn't just about money, Your Honor. That safety deposit box doesn't contain cash. It contains the original blueprints for the Sterling battery blueprints that prove he stole the technology from his late partner, David Greaves. The courtroom erupted. Marcus stood up in the witness box, his composure shattered. Shut up, you shut your mouth, Fiona. The calm, collected billionaire was gone. In his place was a desperate, cornered animal. Order. Judge Thorne banged the gavel so hard the handle cracked. Order in this court. But Fiona wasn't done. She looked Marcus dead in the eye. She hadn't even played her ace yet. I'm not asking for alimony. Marcus, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. I'm asking why you paid a hitman $50,000 from that Zurich account 2 days before David Greaves died in a car accident. The silence in the courtroom following Fiona's accusation was shattered not by a gavel, but by the collective gasp of the gallery. It was a physical reaction, the air sucked out of the room by the sheer weight of the word murder. Murder. Jonathan Kane's voice cracked, losing its polished baritone for a split second. He recovered instantly, his face flushing a dangerous shade of crimson. Your Honor, this is outrageous. I demand the bailiff remove Miss Vance immediately. She is turning this court into a circus with baseless, slanderous lies. Marcus Sterling was gripping the railing of the witness stand so hard his knuckles were white. His eyes darted around the room, no longer seeing a friendly audience but seeing enemies. He looked like a man waking up from a dream to find himself in a burning building. It is not a lie if I have the receipt, Fiona said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. She walked back to her table and pulled a sealed, clear plastic evidence bag from her binder. Inside was a small, rusted silver key and a USB drive that looked old, the kind with a cap you could lose. What is that? Judge Thorne demanded, leaning over the bench. His boredom was gone. He looked like a hawk eyeing a field mouse. This, Fiona said, holding it up, is the safety deposit box key for the Zürcher Cantonal Bank in Zurich, box number 404. It was mailed to me 3 days ago. The return address was Sterling Dynamics, but the handwriting belonged to David Greaves. David Greaves is dead, Marcus spat out, standing up. He died in a drunk driving accident 5 years ago. You're sick, Fiona. You're using a dead man to... He didn't drive drunk. Fiona interrupted, turning to face him. David didn't drink. You know that. He was 3 years sober. The toxicology report was falsified, just like the emissions data for your Greenleaf project. Your Honor, Kane bellowed. I move for a mistrial. This is ambush litigation. None of this was in the discovery. Judge Thorne slammed the gavel down the sound, echoing like a gunshot. Sit down, Mr. Kane and Mr. Sterling. If you say one more word without my permission, I will hold you in contempt and have you dragged to a holding cell. Is that understood? Marcus clamped his mouth shut, his chest heaving. He sat down, but his glare at Fiona was lethal. It promised retribution. Miss Vantes, Judge Thorne said, his voice dangerously low. You are making accusations of capital crimes in a family court setting. If you are bluffing, I will ensure you never step foot in a courtroom again without handcuffs. Do you understand the gravity of what you are suggesting? I do, Your Honor, Fiona said. I am not asking you to try the murder case. I am asking you to admit this USB drive into evidence to prove that Mr. Sterling has perjured himself regarding his assets. The drive contains the ledger of the offshore account Blue Heron, the same account used to pay a consulting fee to a man named Viktor Volkov. A murmur went through the press section. Viktor Volkov. The name was vaguely familiar to anyone who followed the darker side of international news, a security contractor based in Belarus who had been linked to several high-profile accidents in Europe. Kane's face went pale. He knew the name. I object to the admissibility of the drive, Kane said, though his voice lacked its usual fire. We cannot verify the chain of custody. Miss Vance could have put anything on that drive. That is why, Fiona said, turning to Silas, who looked like he was about to faint. We have also subpoenaed the flight logs of the Gulf Stream, G650 tail number N450SD. The one Marcus claimed was sold. The logs show a flight to Zurich on the exact date of the withdrawal, and on the passenger manifest, not Marcus Sterling, but M.S. King. King was Marcus's mother's maiden name. Fiona slammed a thick stack of papers onto the defense table. It's all there, she said. The flight, the bank transfer, the consulting fee to Volkov, and the date, 2 days before David's car went off the bridge. Judge Thorne picked up the papers. He adjusted his glasses. He read the first page, then the second. The room was so quiet you could hear the rain hitting the windows again. After a long minute, Thorne looked up. He looked at Marcus Sterling with a new expression. It wasn't anger. It was disgust. This court is going into recess for 2 hours, Thorne announced. I am ordering an immediate evidentiary hearing in my chambers. Mr. Kane, Mr. Reed, and Ms. Vance, you will join me. Mr. Sterling, you are to remain in this building. Bailiff, please ensure Mr. Sterling does not leave the premises. You're detaining me, Marcus shouted, standing up again. I am a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You can't detain me on the word of a bitter ex-wife. I can do whatever I please in my courtroom, Thorne snapped. And right now you look less like a CEO and more like a flight risk. Court is in recess. As the gavel banged, the spell broke. The reporters stampeded toward the doors to call their editors. This was no longer a divorce settlement. It was the scandal of the decade. Marcus didn't move. He stared at Fiona. He didn't scream this time. He just watched her gathering her papers. He raised a hand to his ear, tapping an invisible earpiece, simulating a phone call. He pointed a finger at her, then drew it across his throat in a subtle, swift motion. Fiona saw it. She didn't blink. But inside her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had wounded the beast. Now she had to survive its thrashing. The judge's chambers smelled of old mahogany and stale coffee. It was a small, cramped room lined with law books that looked like they hadn't been opened in 50 years. Jonathan Kane was pacing the length of the rug, his phone pressed to his ear, whispering furiously. "I don't care how you do it, just find out where she got it. Yes, scrub the server. No, don't delete it. Move it to the encrypted partition. I said handle it." He hung up as Judge Thorne entered from his private restroom, wiping his hands. "Put the phone away, Jonathan," Thorne said wearily. "Unless you're calling your malpractice insurer." "This is a travesty," Kane hissed, slamming his phone onto the table. "That drive is inadmissible. It's hearsay. It's fruit of the poisonous tree. Ms. Vance probably hacked my client's servers." "I didn't hack anything," Fiona said from the corner. She was sitting in a wooden chair, her hands clasped to stop them from shaking. Silas stood protectively beside her, though he looked like he needed protection himself. "Then how did you get it?" Kane demanded, leaning over her, his shadow falling across her face. "David Greaves is dead. Dead men don't mail keys." "He didn't mail it last week," Fiona said quietly. "He set up a dead man's switch." Kane froze. "A what?" Silas asked, speaking for the first time. "A dead man's switch," Fiona repeated. David was paranoid. He knew Marcus was stealing his battery designs. He told me once, "If anything happens to me, wait. Wait until Marcus feels safe." I didn't know what he meant, until I got a notification from a private storage facility in Tacoma. The rent had been prepaid for 5 years. It expired this Monday. When the contract expired, the instructions were to mail the contents to me. "And you just sat on this?" Kane accused. "I got it yesterday." Fiona lied. She had actually received it 2 days ago, but she needed them to think she was reacting on impulse. "I opened the box. I found the drive. And the key." Judge Thorne sat heavily in his leather chair. "If this drive is authentic, Jonathan, your client isn't just losing half his assets. He's going to federal prison for wire fraud embezzlement and possibly accessory to murder. The DOJ will be all over Sterling Dynamics by tomorrow morning." Kane straightened his tie. The panic was gone, replaced by a cold, reptilian calculation. He was the butcher because he knew how to cut the meat away from the bone. "If," Kane said softly. "That's a big if. Right now, all you have is a USB drive provided by a hostile party. We will contest its authenticity. We will tie this up in forensics for years. And in the meantime, Marcus Sterling is a free man. You can't hold him on a civil subpoena, Harrison. You know that." Thorne scowled. He knew Kane was right. Without the police formally arresting Marcus, the family court had limited power to detain him indefinitely. "I'm releasing him," Thorne said, looking at Fiona with apology in his eyes. "But I'm keeping his passport, and I'm forwarding this evidence to the district attorney immediately. That will take weeks to process." Kane smiled. It was a cruel smile. Plenty of time for the truth to come out, or for mistakes to be corrected. He looked at Fiona. "You played a good hand, Ms. Vance, but you emptied your deck. Marcus doesn't like losing. I'd be very careful crossing the street." "Are you threatening my client?" Silas stepped forward, trying to summon some courage. "I'm giving her legal advice," Kane said, picking up his briefcase. "This isn't a game. You just accused a man worth $4 billion of murder. Did you really think he'd just let you walk away?" Kane exited the chambers. Silas collapsed into a chair. "Oh my God. Fiona, what have we done?" "We started a war," Fiona said, standing up. She felt strangely calm now. The fear had burned away, leaving only a cold resolve. "Silas, I need you to take the physical key and the drive. Put them in your firm's safe, the one in the basement." "Me? Why me?" Silas squeaked. "Because they'll come for me first." Fiona said. Fiona walked out of the courthouse an hour later. The rain had stopped, but the sky was a bruised purple. The crowd was gone, dispersed by the delay, but a few dedicated paparazzi were still camping out. She didn't see Marcus's Escalade. He had likely been ushered out a back exit. She walked to her Honda Civic. She was exhausted. Her hands fumbled with her keys. She unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat, tossing her empty binder onto the passenger side. She put the key in the ignition, but she didn't turn it. Something was wrong. The smell. It was faint but distinct. A sweet, cloying scent of cheap cologne and tobacco. Fiona froze. She hadn't smoked in 10 years, and she lived alone. She slowly looked up into the rear-view mirror. Sitting in the back seat, shrouded in the shadows of the parking garage, was a man. He wore a dark hoodie and sunglasses despite the gloom. "Don't scream," the man said. His voice was gravel-accented. "Russian, no Belarusian. If you scream, I will break your neck before the sound leaves your throat." Fiona's hand hovered over the door handle. "Don't do that either," the man said. He leaned forward, and she felt the cold tip of a knife press against the side of her neck, just below her ear. "Drive. Normal speed. We are going for a little ride." "Who are you?" Fiona whispered, tears springing to her eyes. "You know my name," the man whispered. "You said it in court. Victor Volkov sends his regards." Fiona's blood turned to ice. The hitman. Marcus hadn't just paid him 5 years ago. He had kept him on retainer. "Drive," the man ordered. "Go to the docks. The boss wants to have a private settlement conference." Fiona started the car. Her mind was racing. Think. Silas had the evidence. Killing her wouldn't stop the investigation. But Marcus wasn't thinking rationally anymore. He was desperate. As she pulled out of the parking spot, she glanced at the dashboard. Her phone was in the cup holder. If she reached for it, she died. She needed a way to signal for help. She needed a miracle. She turned onto the main road, the knife pressing harder against her skin. "Why?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why does he care so much about the battery? It's just money." "It is not just money," the man laughed softly. "The battery. It does not just power cars, Fiona. It powers drones, military drones. Marcus sold the tech to people who make me look like a saint. If the blueprints get out, he doesn't just go to jail, he gets erased." Fiona's grip on the steering wheel tightened. This was bigger than fraud, bigger than murder. It was treason. She saw a police cruiser parked at the intersection ahead. "Do I crash the car?" she thought. "If I crash, he might stab me. If I don't, I'm dead anyway." "Don't even think about it," the man warned, sensing her tension. Fiona took a breath. She accelerated, not toward the cop, but toward the yellow light. "What are you doing?" the man hissed. "Making a scene," Fiona said. She slammed on the brakes in the middle of the intersection, spun the wheel hard to the right, and braced for impact as the cross-traffic surged forward. The world ended in a screech of metal and shattering glass. Fiona had timed it perfectly, or as perfectly as one could time a suicide move. As she slammed the brakes in the middle of the intersection, a heavy delivery truck slammed into the passenger side of her Honda Civic. The force of the impact spun the car like a toy top, sending it careening into a lamppost. The airbags deployed with a punch that knocked the wind out of her. Dust smoke and the hiss of escaping steam filled the cabin. For a moment, there was only a high-pitched ringing in Fiona's ears. Move, her brain screamed. Move or die. She gasped, tasting blood. Her door was jammed against the lamppost. She looked in the rearview mirror. The back seat was a crumpled mess. The hitman was groaned, pinned between the collapsed roof and the front seat. His sunglasses were gone, revealing cold, dead eyes that were blinking back into focus. He was reaching for his gun, which had fallen to the floorboard. Fiona kicked her door. It didn't budge. She kicked again, screaming with effort. The window shattered. She scrambled out through the broken glass, cutting her hands and knees on the asphalt. "Hey, are you okay?" A bystander was running toward her. "Call 911!" Fiona screamed, pointing at the car. "He has a gun!" That stopped the Good Samaritan in his tracks. Fiona didn't wait. She scrambled to her feet, kicked off her heels and ran. She ran through the stalled traffic, weaving between honking cars, ignoring the pain in her ribs. She could hear sirens in the distance, but she couldn't trust them. If Marcus had connections to Volkov, he might have connections to the police. She ducked into a subway station, vaulting the turnstile and disappearing into the crowd, just as a train arrived. She squeezed into the back car, collapsing into a seat, her head between her knees. She was alive. But for how long she checked her pockets. She had her burner phone, the one Silas had given her, just in case. She dialed Silas. It rang, and rang, and rang. "Pick up Silas," she whispered. Finally a voice answered, but it wasn't Silas. "Ms. Vance." A smooth voice purred. It was Jonathan Kane. Fiona's blood ran cold. "Where is Silas?" "Mr. Reed is indisposed," Kane said casually. "He's currently explaining to my security team why he was trying to hide a stolen hard drive in his office safe. We have the drive, Fiona. You have nothing." "You can't touch that drive," Fiona said, her voice trembling. "It's evidence." "It's corporate property," Kane corrected. "And since you are now a fugitive who just caused a major traffic accident and fled the scene, the police are very interested in your location. Marcus is offering a reward for your safe return. He's very worried about your mental health." Fiona hung up. She crushed the phone under her heel and kicked the pieces under the seat. They had the drive. They had Silas. She was alone. The train rattled on. Fiona closed her eyes, trying to think. Marcus thought he had won. He had retrieved the evidence. He had discredited her. He was probably preparing to leave the country right now to let the heat die down. But he had made one mistake. He assumed Fiona was just a waitress-turned-trophy wife. He forgot that before she met him, she had been a data analyst for the city. He forgot that she was the one who organized his chaotic digital files when Sterling Dynamics was just a garage startup. She didn't need the USB drive. She knew where the bodies were buried because she had unknowingly helped dig the graves. The train stopped at Pioneer Square. Fiona got off. She walked to a public library 3 blocks away, keeping her head down. She went to the bathroom, washed the blood off her face, and put on a discarded hoodie she found on a bench outside. She sat down at a public terminal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She didn't log in to Sterling Dynamics. That would trigger an alert. Instead, she logged into the municipal grid, the city's power regulation system. Marcus's green energy building, the Sterling Tower, was a marvel of modern engineering. It was fully automated, running on his proprietary battery system. It was designed to be a fortress. Fiona smiled grimly. A fortress is just a prison with nicer furniture. She began to type. If Marcus wanted to silence her, she would make sure the whole world heard the scream. It was 8:00 p.m. The rain had returned, lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus Sterling's penthouse office on the 40th floor. Marcus poured himself a glass of scotch. His hand was shaking just a little. He downed it in one gulp. "Is everything secured?" he asked without turning around. Jonathan Kane was sitting on the leather sofa, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "The drive is wiped, physically destroyed. The hitman Volkov's guy is in the hospital, under police guard, but he won't talk. We've spun the narrative. Fiona had a psychotic break, caused a crash, and ran. The narrative holds." And the drone schematics? Marcus asked. Gone, Kane said. The buyers in Riyadh are nervous, but I assured them the leak is plugged. You fly out to Dubai in the morning. By the time you come back, Fiona will be in a facility or... Gone. Marcus nodded. He walked to the window, looking out over the city he thought he owned. She really thought she could beat me, he muttered. She thought a few pieces of paper could topple an empire. She was desperate, Kane said, standing up. Desperate people make mistakes. Suddenly the lights in the office flickered. Then they went out completely. What the hell? Marcus snapped. Power failure in this building. We have backup generators. I'll call security, Kane said, pulling out his phone. He frowned. No signal. What? I have 0 bars, Kane said. The Wi-Fi is down too. A low mechanical hum began to vibrate through the floor. The heavy blast doors installed for corporate security during riots slammed shut over the elevator bank. The electronic locks on the stairwell doors engaged with a loud thud. We're locked in, Kane said, his voice rising in panic. The building is in lockdown mode. Suddenly the massive 80-inch screen on the wall, usually reserved for stock tickers, flared to life. It wasn't a news channel. It was a webcam feed. Fiona's face appeared. She looked tired, bruised, and terrifyingly calm. She was sitting in a dark room, illuminated only by the monitor glow. Hello, Marcus, she said. Her voice was amplified through the office's surround sound system. Fiona! Marcus screamed at the screen. Open these doors, you're digging your own grave. I'm not in the building, Marcus, Fiona said softly. I'm nowhere you can find me, but I am inside your system. You see, you built your tower on the Sterling Protocol, the same protocol you stole from David, and you forgot that David left a back door. There is no back door, Marcus yelled. I had the code audited. You had the source code audited, Fiona corrected. You didn't audit the firmware of the batteries themselves. David hard-coded an override. He called it the kill switch. On the screen, Fiona typed a command. The lights in the office turned red. The air conditioning vents stopped humming. The silence was sudden and oppressive. What are you doing? Kane asked, looking around wildly. The Sterling battery is highly volatile, if not cooled properly, Fiona explained, as if she were giving a lecture. Right now, I have disabled the cooling systems for the server farm in the basement, and the backup batteries on your floor. You're going to blow up the building, Marcus laughed nervously. You don't have the guts. That's terrorism. I'm not going to blow it up, Fiona said. I'm just heating it up, enough to trigger the automatic fire suppression system, but not the water sprinklers, the halon gas system, the one you installed to protect your precious servers. Kane gasped. Halon removes oxygen. It suffocates the fire. And anyone in the room, Fiona finished. You're bluffing, Marcus snarled. You won't kill us. You tried to kill me 3 hours ago. Marcus, Fiona said. But you're right. I'm not a murderer. I'm just a woman who wants a divorce. What do you want? Marcus demanded. Money. Take it, I'll wire you 20 million right now. Just unlock the doors. I don't want your money, Fiona said. She leaned closer to the camera. I want a confession. Go to hell, Marcus spat. Okay, Fiona said. She hit a key. A siren began to wail. A robotic voice announced, warning, battery critical temperature. Halon discharge in T-5 minutes. She's serious, Kane said, sweat beading on his forehead. Marcus, she's serious. We can't get out. The glass is bulletproof. We choke in 5 minutes. I can't confess, Marcus yelled. If I confess, I lose everything. The DOJ, the Saudis, the Russians, they'll all come for me. Better prison than the morgue, Kane screamed, losing his composure completely. He ran to the door and pounded on it. Fiona, I'm just the lawyer. Let me out! T-4 minutes, the robotic voice droned. Fiona watched them on the screen, her face impassive. I'm streaming this, Marcus. Not to the public. I'm not stupid. I'm streaming this to a private server. The link has been sent to the FBI Cybercrimes Division. They are watching right now. If you confess, they have probable cause to storm the building and save you. If you don't, well, the fire department will find your bodies. Marcus stared at the camera. He looked at the red lights. He looked at the timer. 2:59. He realized then that he had never really known his wife. He thought she was weak because she was kind. He didn't realize that kindness was a form of restraint. And he had broken it. Okay, Marcus screamed, falling to his knees. Okay, I did it. I stole the tech I hired Volkov. Just stop the timer. Say it clearly, Fiona commanded. Say I'm Marcus Sterling, ordered the murder of David Greaves. Marcus wept. He was a broken man, stripped of his suits and his arrogance. I'm Marcus Sterling. He sobbed. Ordered the murder of David Greaves. Fiona's hand hovered over the keyboard. And Silas, she asked. He's in the basement, Marcus cried. He's alive. Just let us out. Fiona hit the enter key. The red lights turned back to white. The siren stopped. The locks on the doors clicked open. Thank you, Marcus, Fiona said. The police are in the lobby. I suggest you don't make them chase you. The screen went black. The screen in the penthouse went black. But the silence that followed was short-lived. Down on the street, the wail of sirens was no longer a threat, it was a symphony. The FBI, who had been monitoring the feed thanks to the back door Fiona provided, didn't wait for a warrant. The confession was probable cause. The exigent circumstances of a potential biological or chemical threat, the halon gas gave them the green light to breach. Marcus Sterling was still on his knees, staring at the blank monitor, when the elevator doors were forced open with hydraulic spreaders. The sound of metal screeching against metal was deafening, but Marcus didn't flinch. He was catatonic. The realization of what he had just done, what he had just admitted to, was crashing down on him with the weight of the skyscraper he had built. Federal agents' hands where we can see them. Red laser sights danced across Marcus's expensive Italian suit. Jonathan Kane, ever the survivor, was already on the ground, hands clasped behind his head, screaming, I am legal counsel, I am a non-combatant, I want to cut a deal. Marcus didn't move until an agent hauled him to his feet. As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, he looked around the office. The red emergency lights had deactivated. The air conditioning was humming again. The critical failure had vanished, as if it never existed. He looked at the thermostat on the wall. It read a steady 72 degrees. It was a lie, he whispered, his voice cracking. It was all a lie. The weeks that followed were a media firestorm, unlike anything Seattle had ever seen. The Sterling confession was played on every news channel from Tokyo to New York. The image of the untouchable billionaire sobbing on his knees became the defining meme of the decade, a symbol of hubris brought low. But for Fiona, those weeks were a blur of depositions and debriefings. She wasn't arrested. The district attorney, recognizing her as a whistleblower who had acted under extreme duress, the hitman in her car, granted her full immunity. In fact, they needed her. She was the only one who understood the encryption keys to the Sterling Dynamics servers. 3 months later, the legal dust began to settle. The sentencing hearing was held in the federal courthouse's largest chamber, and yet it was standing room only. Fiona sat in the front row. She didn't have to be there, but she needed to see it. She needed to see the end of the story she had written. Marcus entered the courtroom. He looked like a ghost of his former self. His hair, usually dyed a rich chestnut, was showing grey roots. He had lost weight. The arrogance that had been his armor was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunted stare. He had pleaded guilty. There was no other option. The evidence was insurmountable. The hitman, Viktor Volkov's associate, had sung like a canary to avoid a terrorism charge, confirming that Marcus had ordered the hit on David Greaves and the attempted abduction of Fiona. Judge Thorne, who had presided over the initial family court disaster, was there as a witness, but the sentencing fell to Federal Judge Alana Wise. Marcus Sterling, Judge Wise, said, her voice echoing in the silent room. You built a kingdom on the bones of a better man. You stole intellectual property, you defrauded investors of billions, and you ordered the cold-blooded execution of your partner. You then attempted to silence your wife through terror. Marcus stared at the table. For the count of first-degree murder, I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the counts of wire fraud and corporate espionage, I sentence you to an additional 150 years to be served consecutively. The gavel came down. It wasn't a loud bang. It was a dull thud, a period at the end of a long, painful sentence. Marcus didn't scream. He didn't fight. As the marshals led him away, he paused. He turned his head and looked at Fiona. There was no hate in his eyes anymore, just confusion. How? He mouthed. How did you know the gas wouldn't kill us? Fiona didn't answer. She just watched him disappear through the side door. Outside, the spring air was sweet and clean. The rain had washed the city streets, leaving them glistening under the afternoon sun. Silas Reed was waiting for her by the fountain. He looked different, too. He was wearing a new suit, one that actually fit him. His firm had promoted him to senior partner overnight. After all, he was the lawyer who had taken down Sterling Dynamics. You okay? Silas asked, handing her a coffee. I'm better than okay, Fiona said, taking a sip. It's finally quiet. You know, Silas said, falling into step beside her as they walked toward the parking garage. I've been going over the forensic report on the building hack. The FBI cyber team is still scratching their heads. Oh, Fiona smiled innocently. Yeah, they confirmed that you accessed the building management system. They confirmed you shut down the cooling units. But the halon system. Silas stopped walking and looked at her. Fiona, the halon tanks were removed in 2023 during the lead certification upgrade. The building uses a water mist system now. Fiona stopped and leaned against the concrete railing overlooking the bay. I know. So, there was no gas? Silas asked, his eyes wide. There was no danger of suffocation. David designed the Sterling Protocol, Fiona said softly. But he also designed the building's safety integration. He told me years ago over dinner that halon was illegal in new construction. He ranted about it for 20 minutes. So the kill switch. It was a diagnostic loop, Fiona explained. It's a script David wrote to test the warning lights and the siren speakers. It turns the LED's red plays a pre-recorded emergency message and shuts down the HVAC fans to test the noise sensors. It literally does nothing else. It's a glorified fire drill. Silas stared at her stunned. You bluffed him. You looked a man in the eye, told him he was going to die in 5 minutes, and you were holding a pair of twos. I wasn't playing the cards, Silas. Fiona said, her voice hardening slightly. I was playing the man. Marcus is a narcissist. His greatest fear isn't death, it's loss of control. When I took control of his environment, when I trapped him in a glass box and gave him a countdown, his brain broke. He didn't check the science. He didn't think about the building codes. He just panicked. Silas shook his head, a mix of terror and admiration on his face. Remind me never to play poker with you. I don't play poker, Fiona said. I play for keeps. They reached her car. It wasn't the battered Honda anymore. It was a sleek, safe Volvo SUV. "So," Silas said, tapping the briefcase he was carrying, "that brings us to the final piece of business, the company." "The company is dead," Fiona said. "The brand is dead," Silas corrected. "But the assets, the patents, Fiona, the court awarded you restitution. You are the primary holder of the Greaves-Vance technology. The board has resigned. The shareholders are begging for leadership. You could rebrand. Vance Energy. You'd be a billionaire by Tuesday." Fiona looked at the city skyline. She saw the Sterling Tower in the distance, dark and empty, a monument to greed. She thought about David. She thought about the nights he spent working on the battery, not for money, but because he wanted to solve the energy crisis. He wanted to make the world cleaner. Marcus had turned that dream into a weapon. "No," Fiona said firmly. "No." Silas blinked. "Fiona, we're talking about billions." "Draft the paperwork, Silas," she said, opening her car door. "I want to dissolve the patent." Silas dropped his coffee cup. It splashed onto his shiny shoes. You want to what?" "I want to release the Greaves-Vance protocol into the public domain," Fiona said. "Open source. Anyone can use it. Anyone can build it. Car manufacturers, solar farms, developing nations. No licensing fees. No secrets." "Fiona," Silas stammered, That's insane. You're giving away the holy grail of energy." "I'm giving it back," Fiona said. "It never belonged to Marcus, and it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone. That's what David wanted." She got into the car and rolled down the window. "Besides," she added with a smirk, "can you imagine Marcus's face when he finds out that the technology he killed for is now free for everyone, that his legacy is worth $0? Silas started to laugh. It was a deep belly laugh of pure disbelief. That is the pettiest, most magnificent thing I have ever heard." "It's not petty, Silas," Fiona said, putting the car in gear. "It's justice." She pulled out of the garage, merging into the traffic. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold. She didn't know exactly what she would do next. Maybe she'd go back to school. Maybe she'd travel. But as she drove, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small old photograph. It was her and David years ago, laughing at a picnic. "We won, David," she whispered. She placed the photo on the dashboard and drove on into a future that was wide open, completely free, and finally hers. And that is how Fiona Vance took down a billionaire with nothing but the truth and a poker face of steel. She proved that no amount of money can hide a lie forever, and that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should fear the most. Marcus Sterling thought he could bury his secrets, but he forgot that when you bury something, you're just preparing the ground for it to grow. Fiona didn't just win a court case. She won her freedom and rewrote the future. What do you think? Would you have had the guts to bluff a billionaire while locked in a skyscraper? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice, betrayal, and ultimate revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We drop new dramas every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.